All right, maybe you've been under the water or in a cave long enough and you don't know about the Unity controversy, but at this point, you probably know that Unity is changing their business model and they try to make developers pay based on the install of their game. The backlash from the game dev community was the biggest anyone's ever seen. Unity did step back from their initial proposal, but credibility is all but lost. I even heard that this was the biggest business mistake in the video game's history. Well, maybe it's there in the top two together with Atari's ET release in 1982. But well, it was pretty bad. Hey guys, it's Harry. I've been a game designer and producer for the past 10 years, and in this channel, I want to talk all about game production. So if you're new, welcome. Please subscribe to the channel and like the video. This helps immensely. It makes YouTube understand that you want more content like that. I'm trying to grow the channel, so yay, help me out. We're going to talk about games, production, interesting stories, and behind scenes in the games industry. So if you're a developer or just an enthusiast, follow the channel for more. All right, let's dive into it. Just for context, I've used Unity in my career several times before, and also Unreal. Personally, I use Unreal more, so that would probably be my go-to engine, depending on the game that I'm trying to make. But I've used both, and I have a deep respect for both. Just to summarize the situation, Unity always monetized based on premium licenses per seed. So it was free up to a point, I think it was $100,000 US. And after that, you had to convert everyone in your team to those premium licenses. So there was no revenue share like Unreal does, for example. With Unreal, it's free up to $1 million per year per game. And after that, it's a 5% revenue share with Epic Games. And now Unity has decided to change their model from those premium licenses to a runtime fee that applies to each install of your game. Basically, the developer pays Unity each time a player install the game on their device, regardless if you monetize or not. The first impression I had with that was very mixed. I mean, it's about the message, right? When Unreal says they take 5% cut out of my revenue, they are saying with their marketing that they succeed when I succeed. If my game makes more money, I pay Epic Games more money, which is kind of fair, especially considering that 5% cut is not that big of a deal. It's not a crazy amount. So with this new Unity model, they are monetizing regardless if you make money or not out of those installs. And I think that was the biggest problem for developers. It was more the perception of fairness than the actual numbers themselves. Unity even stated that 90% of the developers won't even be affected by that change. And that's probably true because unfortunately, most developers don't make enough money out of their games. However, this message is still not good, right? Because they're rubbing on everyone's face that developers don't make money with Unity. So not only that, but the model they designed was incredibly confusing. For me, that was the second biggest thing. On Twitter and Reddit, I saw a lot of people trying to guess how the model actually works, how much money you have to pay based on each scenario, installs, revenue. It was simply a mess. And that was the most amateur that could have been. Because if you're planning to make such a big change for developers, it's going to affect or impact directly or indirectly a lot of people and risking generate a lot of backlash. The least you could do is design something that is simple and communicate that well, so people feel comfortable enough on that new model. Because truth be told, there was some potential there for developers, even with this new model. Like games with a high number of downloads and low retention and monetization, like casual or hyper-casual games, would suffer the most with that new model. They would be paying per install and not generating revenue out of most of those installs. But games that could retain and monetize more based on those same number of installs had the potential to retain more revenue in Unity than Unreal, for example. In Unreal, the more you earn, the more you pay. And with the runtime fee, you could potentially keep monetizing those players without having to spend or pay extra money to Unity, in theory, right? So there was at least some potential there for developers. It wasn't 100% bad per se. But then the communication was pretty bad. The premise was bad. It's not that we succeed when you succeed. It was more like we succeed regardless of you. Also worth mentioning that Unity was always seen as super developer friendly. The good old buddy Unity. They'll support the small developer. They're indie by heart, all of that. So it was a big stride to Unity's brand, to their public image. And that's why the impact on credibility was so big. Now they have stepped back from their initial proposal and they have presented a new mixed pricing model. Basically, you can opt for the runtime fee or a revenue share of 2.5%. Overall, after an incredible backlash, they have presented something that is much more interesting for developers. But now they have to rebuild credibility from from scratch, basically, from a very low point. So what struck me really hard in all of that situation is that no matter how well established your business or your image is, one big mistake, one major mistake might jeopardize everything. It might risk your leadership position, it might risk your public image, and even the viability of your business. And Unity wasn't the only example in the industry. Do you guys remember Artifact, the card game from Valve? That to me was an interesting case because they have one of the biggest and most respected game companies in the history. Remember, Valve was responsible for Half-Life, Counter-Strike, Team Fortress, Dota 2, and a lot more. So some of the biggest games in history. Plus, Artifact had no other than Richard Garfield, the legendary designer of Magic the Gathering. So how does a game like that flop so hard? As a card game fan, I was loving Artifact, and I know that a lot of pro players from Gwent, Hearthstone, and other card games were loving too. They were enjoying the game quite a lot. It had a very solid gameplay, interesting, challenging. It was great from the design perspective. But once again, the business model was the issue. You could only acquire new cards in Artifact by paying real money, like the same model back in the day with Magic the Gathering physical cards. So you wouldn't earn anything, any new cards by simply playing the game, like every other card game out there. That was seen as an opportunistic cash grab model from players. Not only that, but Valve had a secondary market for trading cards with other players inside Steam, and that could generate crazy inflation. And basically, a few weeks after launch, the game was completely flopped. They even tried to do a major overhaul in the game and release an Artifact 2.0 version. That also flopped immediately. So well, the takeaway from all that is that if you mess up the business model, if you play with people's money, well, we all tend to get very upset about that. Okay, but what do you think about that? Leave in the comments if you're sticking with Unity even after all of that, or if you're changing to another engine like Godot or Unreal. Once again, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like that. That's it. Thank you guys. Take care.